keep on time so that we can make sure that we get all of your questions answered. So we do have a timer set up. So if you do hear my alarm go off, that's just to keep us kind of moving forward.
Wake up.
So I am the timekeeper today. I'm going to try my best.
Okay.
So I am Jessica Dedick here from SST5, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you today.
I'm Matthew Heath. I'm still him. I was him yesterday. I plan on being him today and hopefully tomorrow as well. Good morning. Welcome.
And good morning. I'm Marla, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm so glad that you are with us as well. Just as a reminder, if you haven't signed in yet, please sign in on our new sign-in form. And also the note page document is in the chat box for you.
This is just a reminder about our social media pages. Please follow us. We try not to push out too much information on social media, but we do try to post it 2-3 times a week, depending on what's going on. Mostly just sort of updates and reminders. YouTube, that's where we put a lot of our PBIS stuff on there. But just follow us, like us. That almost sounds like a plea, but it wasn't. It's really, I guess, to help you. Again, it's mostly reminders.
And we haven't sent out any TFI Tuesdays right now because we know everybody's busy. We know that some of our districts had spring recess earlier, some are going this week. So be on the lookout. They will be returning.
Yes.
As always, our note-taking document can be found in the Padlet, which brings me to another point. Our whole Padlet, we do have a Padlet designated just for this. You can find it at the link that Marla will be putting in the chat. I see there it is now. And oftentimes, if you have the presentation, it's also linked right there in the presentation on that slide itself. So a couple of different ways to access it if you're looking to do so. Next up, we have our meeting expectations. Those are pretty much the same as before, except for we do try to keep our matrix. We try to have our matrix reflect sort of the need from the group. So we have made some additions there throughout the year. We've added turn on your camera. Lately, we put in that please sign in. We do use that sign in information, not to, we're not sending you spam email.
Yeah.
But internally, we do use that to see who's attending our sessions. So it's helpful to, when you sign in and let us know that you were here. Oftentimes it's not a problem. When it becomes a problem is when we have like a group of people attend something and then only one person from that group actually signs in. So we have added that to the matrix. I'm not sure, have we added anything else or just the sign in this month?
This month, yeah, that was the only addition.
All right, so otherwise it's the same. We'll keep moving right on because as Jessica said, we're on a timed agenda, which I love. Next up, our objectives for this morning. We're hoping to have you ask some questions or at least give you some time to ask some questions. Explore some resources used for the recognition this year. Have you engage with some other participants? I'm not sure if we're going to do that so much, being that we only have like a couple of you. So we'll keep that probably to a minimum. We're a small group, so we can stay a little bit more personal. And then end with you creating some action steps if need be, as far as moving forward with recognition.
We're going to try to squeeze on through here.
That is our agenda. Welcome. We're already making it through that. We're moving on to our intention setting. Then we're going to move right into the application where we're going to walk you through that, take a little break, and then go back into the recognition application process and continue walking you through at least tier 1. Give you some time for some questions and answers, and then move on to an optimistic closure, do the checkout, and then have you finish up with the evaluation. All right. So as always, we like to begin with you setting some intentions for yourself, what you'd like to accomplish or learn today, and how you intend on achieving that. So if you could just take like the next 30-40 seconds. I'm pretty sure you probably already have something in mind as far as what you'd like to learn, what you need to take away from this morning's time together in order for it to be productive for you. So go ahead, write that down. And then also include in there how you intend on achieving that. And then we'll move forward.
And if you'd like to share that in the chat, that also helps us as we move forward today.
Yeah, by all means, don't keep it a secret. Especially if it involves us. It's kind of helpful if we know. And again, we're a small enough group that if there is something that you personally need, or something, again, we have a question and answer section, but if there's something that you need personally or you and your team needs, by all means, ask. This morning's a good time to do that. That's what these hours are for.
Yeah, as we will go through the application one row at a time, and there will be opportunities throughout that to ask for clarification on each of those rows. But then if there is any bigger picture questions, we do want to stop everything else. And at 10, we will just move on to big picture questions or any questions beyond what we were able to cover this morning.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, moving on. Hopefully you had some time to reflect on what your intentions are or what you need to take away from the day. So we're going to move on to what is your win? We were going to put you in a breakout. I don't think we're going to do that. Is that correct, ladies?
Yes.
All right. So we're not going to put you in a breakout, but so just ignore that very first part.
Yeah, it would be a really small, awkward breakout. So we want less awkward. Sorry.
We're going to put you in individual breakouts. That way you always hear what you want to hear.
Not necessarily, not in my case.
But what's your win? What's been going well? What's something that you can celebrate or that you'd like to celebrate? And by all means, please share that. Put that in the chat or unmute yourself. Share that with us. We love hearing what's going well and maybe something that didn't go well that you're working on, but you feel positive about it. Sometimes that's, this wasn't going well, but I think we're on a good path now and I feel good about it. That's a celebration, even though it might not have started off that way.
And this is really the perfect time to network and share your ideas, because you may have a neat idea that somebody else wished they would have thought about, or you might even have an idea that somebody in the room can actually help you with.
Cindy, I see you unmuted. Are you going to share something?
I am.
Besides that hat that
This
I
is
love
not
it.
my
She looks-
normal attire, okay?
I love it.
You look fabulous.
We
Oh,
did,
yeah.
I will say that,
Oh, there she is.
obviously March is like our longest month of our lives. But we every month I've done a calendar for the teachers for just to get them motivated and to build up the morale and everything. And we had a couple new teachers and things like that in the building. So we have a theme every single day. Like March was motivational March because we started our testing. So everybody could wear motivational shirts, testing shirts, like fun shirts and everything. And as long as they wore that, they were allowed to wear jeans, which everybody loves to do. And every month we have a theme and every day it's something different. So it's really, I feel, gotten the teachers to realize okay, we didn't take the fun away. We could still do some fun things, and get them motivated. And the kids love it because some of the teachers will go above and beyond with some of the themes. And the kids are like, why do you look like that today? It's that I will say has been really a positive thing for our staff. And just getting them to understand what PBIS is and how we can do it as adults and bring it to the classroom.
Yes, I love visiting your building and finding out what that daily theme is, because it's so fun to see it brought to life. And it's so fun to see the teachers engaging with the students. And I love the fact that the kids don't know what the theme is. So
they don't. They walk in and they're like,
every day.
why do you look? They're like, Mrs. Bova, your hair, why does it look like that? What are you wearing that for? And then the one day we did Western Day. So I was in my cowboy boots, my cowboy hat. So it's fun. It's a fun thing to get them all going.
Yeah, such a good way to celebrate.
Yeah,
I
so every
agree.
month, at the beginning of the month, I send a calendar to the staff and then they have something to go off of.
Now, Cindy, would you be willing to share with us to share out with the network some of those samples of those calendars?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
love what you do.
Yeah, I
That
could
would be
send you I
awesome.
could send you the calendars and
Thank
then
you.
it'll show you
I know
day
you
by
have them
day.
all organized in a nice labeled folder.
Yeah, if you could see my desk right now, you would not be saying that.
And Cindy, I already know what the theme is today, but what's the theme today?
Today's beach day because it's our last day before spring break.
Love
So we
it.
got, everybody has like their summer attire on, really, is what they, and I put out, then of course, they're adults. So I'm like, no swimsuits today, but we can like look cute.
It's funny that even as for our adults, we have to be excited.
Well, I was like, should I put that? I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna put it on. You might have like one crazy person that'll come in like in something that they shouldn't.
Oh, boy.
It is possible.
You never know.
Yeah, no,
But I love that idea of keeping our staff motivated because we have to remember PBIS, even though today we're talking about recognition, PBIS isn't about recognition. It's really about creating that environment of success for our scholars and our staff.
Right.
So laying the foundation so that way we can be successful because we know that our place is a place of learning and of joy. But we have expectations. We're going to help you reach them though. But thanks.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have another quick win or not even a quick win, just a win in general that they would like to share with the group?
I could share. I am at Cheney High School and we are very data driven at Cheney High School. We do data dives all the time to drive everything that we do. And one of the goals on our action plan was to decrease chronic absenteeism. And so we started this initiative where staff identified scholars that we have relationships with, and we did this at the end of February. So we decided that the kids kind of on the bubble, the kids that needed to just get here 1 or 2 more days a week, not the kids that never show up. If we could develop a relationship and kind of a check-in with them, we wanted to see what would happen. And in a 6-week time frame, we decreased chronic absenteeism by 16%, which is it's huge. We cannot believe the turnaround that happened. Just a simple email or an engagement in class, like I need you here tomorrow because we're doing this, just reminders, just to get kids here literally 1 more day a week really matters with scores. So we are very excited about that at Cheney.
And Angel, I so love when Trish says, she tells the kids, we need you here. We need you here. Not just that we want you, we need you here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's our tag now. We need you here. So good to see your face. We need you here.
And you said it was just a little thing. It's not a little thing, it's relationships.
Relationships
are everything. Thank you for sharing.
Yes,
welcome.
thank you.
you think about that, though, there's a big difference between, hey, you need to be at school tomorrow, and hey, we need you at school tomorrow.
Yeah, not you need to be at school because they're like, I beg to differ.
Here's why we need you to be here, not just, not just that like point in the versus, hey, we need you at school tomorrow or whatever, the next day,
All day.
because you're important, like whatever. That's a big difference between, again, waving fingers about why you're not in school.
Yeah, waving fingers only gets us so far. And it's not far at all. Okay.
All right. Anybody else? We good? Forever hold your peace. I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not actually sharing my screen, so.
I will share real quick. Can I share
Sure.
something real quick?
Yeah.
I was wondering, I was actually very surprised.
Yeah, no.
I have to do a shout out.
This is so valuable. This is so valuable networking.
I have to do a shout out to my friends at Summit Academy Secondary. And I know Greta is wearing so many different hats and Clark is too today. with their administration being out and then their lead secretary, administrative assistant. So they're wearing a lot of hats. So I'm going to speak for them. We always wanted to gauge where we were with PBIS, just doing that TFI walkthrough tool. And so we did a first round in January where maybe we just started to share the expectations. It was just like to show where we were in the ground and setting the ground where we were with the expectations, their four expectations with be respectful, be safe, be engaged, and be receptive. So it was just being rolled out. And in January, our results were not as great. And we knew it was okay because maybe the kids were not buying into it and the teachers maybe were not buying into it right away. And it was just, we were starting fresh and kind of rebranded. And then the magic happens. Greta and Clark hit the ground running with it. We had it always being involved in their BLTs and their TBTs. So then teachers were hearing it. Ashley did a nice job also showcasing that this was something that their framework that they wanted to implement and everyone was going to buy in. But we had everyone's voice being heard. And then we just did another round in March and we had unbelievable results. The kids knew the expectations and they were able to tell you what they meant. And now we're tying it into with the point system. So do they know why they're getting points for being receptive? And we're taking some time and talking about what does receptive mean? And a lot of them, when I asked them, what does that mean? They said, it's just like what we're doing right now. We're talking and we're listening to each other. It's allowing me to get feedback, whether it's constructive feedback or positive. So it's really been great to have those kids have an awareness of not just really just stating the four expectations, but really understanding what each expectation means. So that's been exciting. And we're going to move forward. So I just wanted to do a shout out for them because sometimes we get boggled down with everything that we've got to do and we don't celebrate those little wins. And I tell Greta and Clark all the time that as PBIS leaders, they're doing an amazing job and you have to celebrate those little wins in order for all those little wins to pile up and get a big win. So shout out to them because I know they probably didn't want to share because they're so busy, but they're doing a great job and we're seeing some effects with it. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's almost shameful that like as human beings, we quickly move right on to like, what do I need to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Even though yesterday it was, I need to do this, I accomplished it, but we immediately just go right to, okay, that's fine, but now what, right? I mean, now what do I need to focus on? Now what do I need to do? And we take no time at all to ever celebrate what it is that we've accomplished, because in the grand scheme of things, when you look, I mean, I'm guilty of it. When you look at all of those, again, as Susan just stated, all of those small wins, and you start to reflect on what that really added up to create, or, you know, what that sort of produced, it's a big win.
Right.
And that's not, I'm not trying to sell like people on small wins or anything. It's just productivity in general. We don't, you know, again, we don't look at all of those things accumulatively and go, wow, I really have accomplished a lot, or wow, we've really accomplished a lot this year, you know, because again, we're quick to move on, or we're already looking at a much bigger sort of larger picture and not looking at all the smaller things that we've managed to achieve. So, but Susan, you led right in really well to this quote. You don't get results by focusing on results, you get results by focusing on actions that produce results. And you stated that, you know, you worked on the action steps to get the students to know and understand those expectations, not just, you know, you weren't hung up on, well, they don't know the expectations. And that's what, you know, like you looked at, how do we get better results, right? How do we produce those? And to produce those, or to get better results, we need to do these things. You know, it's like that old, what is the old saying about, you don't you don't grow an elephant by weighing it, right? You grow an elephant by feeding it, by nurturing it.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing. So
I don't really have room for an elephant, but I get it.
I was going to say a bunny. Bunny,
Plant.
a plant.
Okay. Okay, so don't grow elephants.
Yeah, we're not eating the elephant either.
Oh, yeah,
Is that why you're growing the elephant?
Only if it's a chocolate.
absolutely. All right, well, that leads us right into our recognition updates. And I think we're going to jump right into, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
right into the application. So
So Matthew, can you show us how do we find this application?
And then-
Where is it located?
And then what do we do after we find it?
Oh, my goodness.
well, I'm gonna find it right here on the slide, but
You can't move the people.
moving some people over. But would you like me to go a different way?
No, this is exactly it. And I can throw this in the chat as well.
Sorry, I am like watching Matthew do this.
We're all watching
there.
there. Struggle.
I could go right to the Department of Education.
Oh,
No, because we've been giving the link out, so this is fine, but the downloading of it is the important piece. So Matthew, what do we do once we find it?
Lose your mind. No. What I was doing, or what I was trying to do was, I was going to this second page, actually. So only because, Marla, you just asked, what do I do once I've gone to the application? And once if you read any of the application, you get to page 2, the very first thing it says, to complete the application, download and save it first. Do not complete it on Google Drive or your web browser. The reason being, you can't save anything. Unless you download it, you're not able to save it. And then what you're forced to do is eventually copy it or make a, it's just not a saved version, which everybody, including us, would prefer that you downloaded it, saved it, sent your saved file to, or added your saved file to your Google folder. But in this case, for me to do that, Marla, I'm going to go right up here to this little arrow.
Mhm.
That's going to give me the prompt, which I'm not even sure if everybody sees that on my screen.
Not see?
but there's a prompt that says, where do you want to
Yeah.
save this? And then he's clicking save.
Yeah. So that's the download button there. Most people probably realize that. Print, this gives you some other options, but this little first one is your download. That's kind of a,
And this is the reason we didn't include it in your initial folders, because we didn't want you to even try using it in there. But yeah, once you have downloaded it, then add your information on there digitally. Now,
And when you save it, you want to save as your building name. So that way it's clearly identified as yours. And even if you want to add in your IRN number, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to. Or even if you want to put in the designation that you are applying for, you could do that as well. But the important piece is saving it as your building's name, so you can absolutely electronically input the information.
and it's okay if you print it to initially collect your information, but please enter it digitally because it will be scored digitally. So it still needs to be in a PDF format when the region that's scoring it receives it.
so I've downloaded it. I've not saved it to a particular place. It's only in my downloads. That's obviously, that's up to you where you want to download it and have it forever sort of exist. For me personally, it's just sitting in my downloads, but it's here. I'm able to begin inputting or editing the document as much as I can. I don't know.
Okay, so with that, can we actually scroll back to that very first page really quickly? So a lot of this information is about the intent to apply, and that was already due. So at this point, I believe everybody in the room has already submitted their intention to apply. If somebody has not yet submitted that, they are ineligible to receive recognition this year. But just a couple of things that I want to make sure we understand, that the application is due May 1st, 2023, and that is by midnight of May 1st. So it's not 5 p.m., not 3 p.m. It is midnight on May 1st. Those folders will no longer be active for you to add additional information. On that very first paragraph, it does say that it must be submitted electronically. So we're going to keep reminding you that it all has to go into those folders that I sent out to each of the teams that did submit their intention to apply. And it's all being done through Google. And that's that Google folder that I sent out again to those buildings. So the bottom part of this, we've already finished, but I wanted to make sure that we really got to that highlighted section that Matthew just pointed out. I'm going to move on to page 2. So this is kind of some of the big checkpoints, but each row is a required checkpoint. So these are just some of the ones that they really want to make sure that you don't miss. So again, as Matthew already pointed out, please download the file and save it before you start editing it. Your application requirements, we are going to just briefly review those. So if you're in your very first year of implementing PBIS, you should only be applying for bronze level recognition. If you are beyond that first level of implementation, you're eligible to apply for any of the levels. So I know there's still some misunderstanding about you have to get bronze before you can become silver. You have to now. When we're scoring it, you have to qualify for the bronze and you have to qualify for each tier as it's moving on. But that doesn't mean that last year you had to be bronze in order for this year for you to demonstrate silver. We focus on 1 year at a time. So as long as this isn't your first year implementing PBIS in general, continue to show and support what success you're seeing in your schools.
Which, I mean, so Jessica, it doesn't even have to be consecutive years of like,
No.
we've held bronze for a number of years. Maybe we were bronze 2 years ago. We let some things slide in the past year or two, didn't get bronze. But now we feel like our bronze is strong again. We've implemented tier 2. We want to apply for silver. Does that mean I can then?
You are perfectly, as long as you have the evidence and the solid system to support it, you absolutely can show that evidence. Now, again, hopefully you submitted that intention to apply, but there is no prior designation requirements there. Then they do have some other important information. I already said it, and we're going to keep saying it. It is your responsibility to ensure all of your evidence is in those folders by May 1st, midnight, 11:59:59. After that, you will no longer have access to that evidence, and you won't, the region that scores you will not be reaching out to you for additional clarification. I know last year there was a little bit more wiggle room as we communicated with some people when there was sharing, but this year nothing should be shared. It's just PDFs or Word documents, so it shouldn't be a sharing access concern. This is another new feature that we've been talking about all year, but now we have a little more information, is that in August of 2023, the Ohio Department of Education is going to pull your out-of-school suspension data, your in-school suspension data, and your expulsion data from the 2022-2023 school year. And that student outcome measure is now a part of this rubric, which we'll get to hopefully soon. So you can see in the rubric exactly how it's being calculated, but that is one of the new pieces. And that's one of the reasons that your whether or not you receive the recognition is going to be delayed from previous years. So usually we can, excuse me, reach out by the end of August, early September. But this year it's going to be later, to the middle of September to the end of September, that we'll be able to share out the results of the application process. And again, we'll get further into that as we get to that row. A reminder that the full tiered fidelity inventory, that's the TFI, and the self-assessment survey, which is the SAS, you can find those resources at PBISapps.org. I believe at least the TFI is also on PBIS.org. The Center for PBIS has the TFI. I'm not sure if it has the SAS or not. I meant to look.
I believe it
today.
does not.
Okay, that's why I think
does not.
why they put PBIS apps, because it covers both of them. But if you are still trying to find those, you can find them on that website.
And if you do need help, please reach out to one of us or your SST consultant that works within your building, or even your ESC consultant that works in your building.
Yeah, we are communicating with them as well, so that they are also another branch of support for for all of the schools that are working through this. Something that is slightly different this year as well is that the TFI and the TFI walkthrough, so the formal scoring of those, because remember again, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but that TFI should be formally scored by your team during this school year. But that can be done internally. So traditionally, we would request that an external evaluator be used, or facilitator, excuse me, especially for that silver and gold level, but this year it's not required for that to take place. So that formal scoring can be done internally this year. I know I've still had some of my schools reach out and ask for a little bit of support with that, because it is different if you're not used to doing those walkthroughs. So they just need a little extra guidance, and that's perfectly fine.
And some of my schools actually like the fact that I did the walk arounds instead, because it was more of a genuine response then.
Yeah. And then again, we keep saying that the application needs to be digital when you do submit it. So please don't handwrite it and scan it. Because the scorers will be completing that scoring part of the rubric directly in the PDF once they are reviewing it. So that right-hand column, you can leave blank. You can make your own mental note of what your scores will be, what you believe you're scoring, but they are asking that you keep that part blank for the scorers to add the official scores. Please redact any student information from your evidence. So as you are moving forward, especially with those tier 2 and tier 3 supports, please make sure you're redacting that student information. And then, of course, if you need help with this, we're here for you. So again, just some of the checklists, that building program demographic information, that's in the document itself. And Marla's going to talk about it in a minute with your TFI scores. Again, we're going to talk about this in the row, but we need to make sure it's the itemized scores and the percentage for each of the tiers that you're applying for. Remember that walkthrough data form needs to be page 28 of the TFI. So if you were using another walk around form for your informal data collection throughout the year, that's wonderful. But for this application, we need it to be page 28 of the TFI, the official form. The school profile template is required. It's in the application. Marla's going to talk about that as well. The self-assessment survey, the results are going to go in the application as well. Marla will talk about that in a second. This is one that you might miss, is your team photo. Make sure that you take a team photo. Now, yes, you can use last year's photo if it's the same team, but I strongly encourage you to take a new fresh photo and celebrate what you've done.
Absolutely.
And wear your school gear if you want to. You don't have to. But it's a great opportunity to just take that photo, and remember the work that you've been doing. I forgot what I was about to say.
You were talking about celebrating.
Yeah.
You were talking about taking the photo. You were talking about wearing school gear. It'll come to you after.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. While you're thinking about that, I just want to share with you that this checklist, though it may not be all encompassing, it really does have some really highlights there, because there's some live links that will take you directly to certain pieces. So when you check off this checklist, know that is not everything that you need to do, but it's like the highlights, shall I say.
Yep, I still don't know what to say. I think it was just,
Trying to give you time.
no, I think it's really just about that celebration, and I know. So they use the photo then on the showcase. So if you do receive that recognition, this is what we look at statewide to celebrate your success. So if you do have different tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 teams, excuse me, you can merge those all together. You can have separate team photos. There is no official format, but we do love the celebration part, because that's important to make sure we're celebrating our success. And we're memorializing the people that are doing the work behind all of this system.
It also goes on our website as well.
It does.
Mhm.
So then,
Beginning to sound like more and more reasons to not include a logo.
Never, Matthew.
It's gonna be posted everywhere, okay? It's gonna be billboards.
not on the billboard.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
I shouldn't say, I swear, because who knows what'll happen. So there is the additional, for silver applicants, you are required to complete Appendix A, which is linked in this document. And that's the only place you can find that Appendix A. And that's another one of those where you must download it and enter your information and then re-upload it.
Yeah, this is a little sneaky thing.
Yeah, especially because it says must print, and that I don't love that language because you can just download it and edit it. Yeah, because Matthew's already wanted him to edit it right in his browser. So just like the application itself, make sure if you are applying for silver that you download that Appendix A, enter your information, and then you'll upload that into your folder. It tells you where to put it. And in addition to Appendix A for silver applicants, you are required to complete page 30 of the TFI. So it can't be your own version of it. It has to be page 30. Excuse me. And then for gold applicants, again, for gold, you have to have all of those other requirements, but you're also going to have page 31 of the TFI. And again, it's okay if you were using another document to kind of keep your team organized and to assess your implementation, but for gold application, you must complete page 31 and include that in your evidence.
So let's just take a little closer look at the building program demographic information. I know it's very self-explanatory, but some of the things that we want to make sure that we go over is you do have to indicate which level you are applying for. And if, for example, you said that you were going to do silver, but after doing the TFI, you realize maybe silver isn't where you are aiming for, you're going to stick with bronze, then just let us know, and it's okay to change your mind at this point in time. When you go down, first thing I want to share with you, it is true, the font sizes throughout this application are not uniform. So try not to let that throw you off. It throws me off a little bit, but don't give it much of a thought. One of the other things that we really want to call to your attention is make sure that you do have the correct district IRN number, as well as the correct building IRN number, because those are also things that are going to be used to help us, especially with that student performance data. And then decide who is going to be the person that's going to be the PBIS contact name. I think the school principal or program director is pretty much self-explanatory, but many schools have co-leaders. So we do have to have one contact person for each building. And we always want to help you remember that it's important to make sure that that email address is correct, because they will use that also to reach out. Of course, down the bottom, you will click all of the grade levels that are in your building. So we do have buildings that have pre-K through 5 in them, or pre-K through 2. Just make sure that you're careful about that, because what you check is what they're going to look for. So I know that's very self-explanatory, but just wanted to make sure that we went over that. But before we go forward, any questions, any thoughts, or anything that you wanted to bring to our attention that maybe we missed?
Marla, I do have a question. So when you're talking about that action plan, the TFI action plan that most schools do every year, and April is usually a time that we look at that again, even though we've been looking at it during every meeting, we recalibrate in April. So like the action plan forms that I've created for my the buildings that I support, that would not be, that's good, great for them, but that's not the one that they want us to use. It's the page 30 for the documentation, correct?
Oh, no, Susan, we're going to talk about that, because I love the action plans that you have developed for your buildings. Page 30 is something completely different, and that's for silver and for tier 2. When
Okay,
we get to the action plan, you can absolutely use the one that's in the TFI, which I believe is page 26, no, 25, 26, and 27. or you can have your own, but we'll get to that. But that is a great question. And the other thing you said that just was music to my ears was the fact that you keep it an organic document and you review it all the time.
Yes.
Okay. All
And
right.
I
Oh,
did put in the chat about a friendly suggestion that the TFI walkthroughs or the walkarounds that you talk about. I know a lot of buildings, like I'm in one currently right now, that they didn't want to do it alone because of union issues. So I think that is an option that you can always call on your SST consultant to do that for you, or you can do it with them. And I think that's been a great learning experience for Greta and I when we did Summit Academy Secondary. Having her walk around with me has been a great experience. So I just want to put it out there that you're not alone, that you can call our, your SST consultant to also do those with you or for you.
Thank you, Susan, or your ESC consultants. So the next piece that we want to make sure that there's no questions, because I really subscribe to Anita Archer where she says, do not commit a suicide. This school profile template is something that we're going to do and look at as a comparison from last year to the current year. There is some vocabulary words on there or terms that they use that could be a little misleading. For one, the middle column says your total for previous academic year. You can go back and find your total data for the number of minor referrals if you collect them. If you don't collect them, that's okay. Just put not applicable. Your major referrals, which is probably your office referral forms. Sometimes they're called DRFs, sometimes they're called ODRs. The number of in-school suspensions, number of out-of-school suspensions. Now, here's where we look at the number of days for out-of-school suspension. So the difference is between the number of suspensions that have been given. What does that equate to in days? And then the next one is the number of students with one or more out-of-school suspensions, number of expulsions, and number of days for expulsions. So that is our information from last year. The very first row says early childhood only. That means if you are solely an early childhood program, that is where you actually input your information. So if you do not have, that doesn't mean you have early childhood in your building. These are for those separate programs. Now, the final column is total for current academic year. That's where it gets maybe a little muddy because our applications are due when again, Jessica?
May 1st.
That is not the end of the year for any of us. Even for some of my earlier schools that may end early May, they're still in session by the time this application is due. So whatever date you decide to pull your data, that's when I would, and this is a Marla-ism, it's not required, but I would probably say as of April 15th, this was our number. You don't have to do that. You can put down the number that you are achieving or retrieving from that particular data set. But I also would encourage you to stay within the same date. So don't do it in different dates. If you're doing April 15th, do all April 15th. If you're doing, I don't know why I picked tax day.
Yeah, right.
Probably because it's
like
taxing.
Saturday this year.
Constant reminder, that's you just.
If you choose to do it on April 28th, just do all April 28th. So hopefully that is more clear than maybe it was when you first looked at it.
Now, Marla, if I'm a PBIS lead, where do I find that? I know my minor and my majors because we look at that, but where would I get the official number for those in-school, out-of-school suspensions and expulsions? Because I don't always have that formal data. So who could I ask for that?
That is really a great question. Hopefully, I know that we always talk about the importance of having that building administrator on your team. Your building administrator will absolutely be able to provide you the designation or the location, or even give you the numbers for this form. If you don't have a building administrator that is current on your team, you can also reach out to your EMIS coordinators. They also have this information as well. I know that the one district that I do work with, they have a wonderful system that everybody can access the information whenever they need, but that's not the same for everyone. Great question, Jessica. The next row down is the average daily attendance. So as you look at that, you're going to think about, again, what was it the previous year? And you're going to know the total from last year. You will not know the total for this school year, but again, whatever date you've chosen, try to stick with that date.
And how do I find that number?
Same process. I would imagine in this day and age, we are all so alert about that chronic absenteeism and our attendance rate, but that is easily calculated. Well, I use the word easily lightly, but it is easily calculated, and your EMIS coordinator, your building administrator, or your data coordinator for your team would have this information. And for many of our teams, I know attendance becomes part of their decision roles. So on that document alone for the school profile template for a 22-23, any questions on that particular page alone? Cool. So hearing none, do we have time to go on or shall we take?
My timer went off. I swear that's not a phone call I was receiving. That is our time for our break. So being the timekeeper, we are gonna kind of stop here as letting you finish that page. We're gonna take a break. So stretch, look away from your screen for a little, take a deep breath. We're gonna come back at, let's say 9:30. Let's still go 9:30 if that's okay, if the room's still kind of okay. So 9:30, we're gonna keep rolling into then almost to the rows. Okay, take a break.
Welcome back, my friends. Hopefully you did actually step away from your computer, did some stretches, got a school appropriate drink. Because now we're going to head into a little bit more of the application. Again, we want to make sure that it's as clear as possible. We know that now the self-assessment survey, though it has always been with us and has always been recommended, this is the first year it's actually required. And as Jessica alluded earlier, you can easily get the self-assessment survey through PBISapps.org, and you can do it paper and pencil if you would like to. We strongly suggest that you don't, because paper and pencil can be quite brutal. We oftentimes recommend that you reach out to one of us or your ESC consultant, so that way we can set it up for you electronically. So this is where you actually record your self-assessment survey scores. That is hard to say. You can see that you want it to be within that year's time. So when you think of the date administered, if you actually did this back in January of 2022, that's not going to be really as current as you need it. So you want to think within that year's time. So May of 2022 to May of 2023 is probably that time frame you're going to look at. The SAS is one of those surveys that we actually recommend to at least do annually, because it is that perception survey. It lets us know what the rest of our staff is actually thinking. So when you look at this page, it's asking you to record the school-wide, the non-classroom setting, the classroom systems, and the individual student systems scores. And if you remember, or if you can reflect back to the SAS scores, if you've already done them this year, if you've done them in the past, you see on the left-hand side, they're green, and on the right-hand side, they're blue-gray. The green side is the current status, what is in place, what is partially in place, and what is not in place. The blue-gray side is the priority for improvement. And so you want to make sure that you list those, the high, medium, and low. This year, there is no set level that they're looking for. What they are looking for is that our school teams are actually utilizing the self-assessment survey to help them make decisions. So that is what this whole entire page is looking at. So again, just taking into consideration this page about the self-assessment survey, if there's any questions that you might have, the audience.
So Marla, we're not simply putting in here yes, no, maybe.
No, great question, Matthew. I'm sorry I wasn't clear. No, you're going to actually put your scores that is on the SAS. So you're going to put that 70% or that 53%. And maybe what we can do is during some time when we're moving on through the other piece, we're going to pull up a SAS that has been done already this year and show you that, so that way we're as clear as possible.
Yeah.
But that is a great question. I hadn't thought about that, Matthew.
Which is another great reason why using the electronic version of the SAS is more,
Efficient.
yes, because you're gonna, all of those things will be generated for you upon completing the SAS, or upon your team, your staff completing the staff. But
That's a hard to say too.
in the survey. How about I just say it that way? I actually meant to say SAS, but it came out staff. But
I think, Matthew, you're going to tell us a little bit about that bronze level, silver level, and gold level.
I am, yeah, no, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the recognition levels and what that looks like this year, and sort of how everyone will be assessed. I almost said graded. And you'll see some sort of repetition throughout each of these levels. So, which is good, because it really doesn't change throughout all three. But I do want to call your attention to what it will require for like bronze. So to earn bronze level recognition, buildings programs must earn a minimum score of 70% on the TFI. So that, unlike previous years, is no different. 70% is what was asked of in the past years on the TFI, with the addition of 80% on tier 1 rubric as well. So all of those items that we're actually going to go through here shortly. You also are to score an 80% or higher on that as well, which, as Jessica pointed out, and we'll talk about in a little bit, that also includes that student progress measure. So, and again, as I stated, sort of repetitive, but silver, much the same, 70% on the TFI on both tier 1 and 2, though. And an 80% on the tier 1 and 2 rubric as well. So Jessica and I had this conversation yesterday. I was asking questions just, I don't know if it was for my own knowledge or if I was just quizzing her.
Quizzing her.
Maybe, but I asked, so like in the case of silver, because you start to see this, you know, you have to score 70% on tier 1 and tier 2 of the TFI, as well as an 80% on the tier 1 and 2 rubrics. I asked, are any of those accumulative? Can I score a 60 on one and a 85% on the other, and they average out to be, and I don't know what that actually averages out to be. So I just pulled some numbers out of nowhere. And the answer to that is no. It's not accumulative. You can't, it's not averaged. It's not, it is just what it says it is. You have to get a 70% on both the tier 1 and tier 2 TFIs, as well as an 80% on the 2 rubrics. So, and that is an 80%, not a 77%, not a, and again, I'm not sure how the numbers all work out, because obviously if there's 18 questions, however 18 is defined, I mean, it's.
And yeah, each section, it does have a specific number written on it for the qualifications.
I do know in one case, because Jessica did say this, in one case it is averaged or rounded up because the number doesn't, correct?
Yeah, so if you look, when we get into even the next page, you can actually scroll down a little bit. You'll see for bronze, they give you the exact score you need. So 80% for them is equaling 18 out of 22 points. It says right below bronze tier 1 scoring rubric. Because 18 is actually like 81 point something percent. Forgive me, I'm not fast math. Whereas if you got 17 points, it's only 77% or something like that. It's not the full 80%. So the numbers are a little weird. Basically, your goal is for the 18 out of 22 points is the requirement to meet that bronze recognition. So each tier does have the exact numbers.
And then last but not least, gold, much the same way, 70% on both the tier 1, 2, and 3 TFI, and an 80% on the tier 1, 2, 3, and 3 rubrics. And so again, I do like the fact that they've kept those consistent throughout all 3. But the important thing is it is all 3, or in the case of bronze, it's the TFI and the rubric, or the tier 1 rubric, and silver would be tier 1 and 2 TFIs and tier 1 and 2 rubrics. So I do like the fact that they've managed to keep it clean and the same. All right, so moving on to the actual rubric itself, which we just mentioned. Very similar though to the TFI.
So your TFI, and I know I talked about this earlier, but we're going to keep repeating it. So for this specific evidence, they're requiring that the team has scored themselves on the TFI. And for the scoring rubric, in order to earn the 2, we need both the evidence of a total percentage that is 70% or higher, and they want the items report of the scores that you've given for each of those features. So those scores should be a 0, a 1, or a 2. What isn't explicitly written in here, but should be understood for all of this evidence, it should be from this school year. So you might have scored yourselves on the TFI this year, but it's just written, it's just scored and you just know that it is. But the people who will be scoring your application need to know it's from this school year. So if you have the exact date that the team scored it, make sure that's on your form. If you can't remember the exact date that the team did score it, it's okay to put a month and a year, but I would absolutely include that information on that. So Matthew, can you actually pull up our mock folder for us, please?
That's also the beauty of using PBIS apps,
Mhm.
because they do have these wonderful, colorful, professional charts and graphs ready for you. But if you don't have access, you can absolutely still add in this information professionally.
Was it in here?
Yes, so here is our mock folder. We've used this in previous sessions before, but this is Constellation Intermediate. They don't exist, they're fake, okay? But this is kind of what your folder should look like. This specific fake school is applying for silver, so you'll notice that they have tier 1, tier 2 folders in there. But what we're gonna go into is that tier 1 folder. Can you please open that up for us? You'll see that there is a folder that says tiered fidelity inventory TFI. So go ahead and open that up for us. And in here, I have a couple of different examples of what you could do. So Matthew, if you click open that first one for us, please, or at least in preview mode. This is a hand scored TFI. So if this is the way that your team did it, this is fine. Notice that I did add Constellation Intermediate on there. I also included the date that the team did go through and score themselves on it. It's okay if it wasn't in March, if it was earlier in this year, as long as it is within this school year. But you'll notice here, we circled each of the scores as a 0, a 1, or a 2. So moving through this, you'll see that they score themselves through this. There was a discussion about the walkthrough tool. All of this is pretend, but you can see that the handwritten scores is fine. And then at the bottom of this section, trying to remember if it was just tier 1. It is just tier 1. The team did score themselves with both tiers, but for this example, we just scanned the pages for tier 1. You'll notice that there is a total score there that shows that team scored themselves 30 out of 30, and that equaled 100% for implementation based on the TFI. So this is acceptable as your evidence because it meets that 70% or higher. It shows the item score and it shows your overall score for tier 1. That's fine. What Marla was mentioning though is this specific imaginary school gave me their scores as well to enter into PBIS apps, the same place where we can add those SAS scores. And it gives you a fancy schmancy report like this. Now I realize this is the same information, but what's great about this is it can show you scores from year to year to year. And that's really beneficial for your team to use for action planning, because remember, this isn't about the recognition of the statewide recognition. This is about celebrating our successes and using this information to move forward as a team.
Improving outcomes for scholars.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you, Marla.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. That's what I'm here for.
So this one does have all 3 tiers in there. But this demonstrates that item score. It does not include the overall score. So that's why we have one more document also in that folder that has that percentage. And again, this is helpful because you can see from year to year the growth. So the darker green was their initial implementation. And then the lighter green was their most recent one from this school year.
As well as tier 2.
Yes, so this would be the exact same report that I put into my tier 2 folder as well. So it's okay that it has both of those, but I would absolutely add it into my tier 1 folder because it is a requirement, but then I'm gonna upload this exact same chart and the exact same item report into that tier 2 folder as well. And I know that we're not talking about tier 2 right now, but there are some of those pieces that apply to both of those. So I'm going to pause for a second and see if we have any questions about this specific line of the application.
I have a quick question. So entering the TFI information actually in the folder, that's all we need to do. There's nothing that needs to be done on that application page besides mark the checkbox. Right? Like the evidence just goes in your folder, even though there's a checkbox on the application. The application checkbox means you put it in your folder.
That's a great, yes, that's a great question. The checkbox, oh my goodness, is purely for you to make sure, did we add that? Because that's essential. Because if you can't demonstrate that, your whole application is void. So-
Okay, so, and then that would be the same for your SAS and your picture. It doesn't mean you attached it in your application. It means it's in your folder.
That's a great question. Yes, that is purely for you to know. We added that into the folder. We added that into the folder. Great point.
Thank
Angel
you.
always asks great questions.
Thanks, Marla.
And I really like how you said that, Jessica, because honestly, the very first thing they're going to look at is your TFI scores. If you don't have your TFI scores in there and it doesn't equate at least the minimum of 70%, they're not going to look at anything else. So the next item on our wonderful rubric or application, what I loved about this is the fact that they did marry the two together and we don't have two separate documents to shuffle around. And Jessica and I and Matthew have talked about the fact we wish they would have numbered the rows because this is row 2. Row 2 is your walkthrough data form. And it is page 28 from the TFI. As Jessica mentioned earlier, I know many of our schools do informal walkarounds throughout the school year using their own form. That is beautiful. And please, please, please don't stop doing that. But the only one they want to see, and they only want to see one, is page 28. So Matthew on the keyboards, can you go back to our Constellation folder? Because we're out of this world. And as you can see in tier 1, you're going to see a folder that clearly says walkthrough tool, page 28. The only thing in there will be the walkthrough tool. So if you open that up or even in preview mode, you'll see down, if you can show just a little bit, you can see there's scores down below. There's actual numbers there that says how many expectations that they have awareness of or no. This particular school has 4 of them. So this is not a yes or a no. Matthew, I'm taking heat from that last question that you asked me. It is definitely saying, I know 4 out of 4 or 3 out of 4. I know that when I do it, I oftentimes write the 3 out of 4 or the 3 out of 3. I love how this school did it. And I appreciate the fact that they even sort of kept track of the grade level. You don't have to do that, but that's something I do too, because I always want to make sure I'm getting a nice cross section of the building. And you have the percentages on those total rows. And there are those certain percentages from the TFI that we need to actually utilize. We're looking for specific ones. On the student side, we know that we are looking at least 50% of our students have received some sort of acknowledgement. We also know that we're looking for that certain percentage, which is now just went right out of my head, for the amount of students that know their expectations.
70% of our.
That is it. Thank you. On the flip side, we know that we are looking at the fact that at least 90% of our adults have utilized our acknowledgement system. Thank you, Matthew. I love how you put those little bubbles over there. And
It's horrible handwriting. I apologize.
no, it's not horrible handwriting at all. And then we also know that there is that certain percentage that we're looking for that our adults actually know our expectation. That's usually not the one that we're ever concerned about, but it's that consistency that we want to see. So again, for row number 2, which is only about the TFI walkthrough tool. And I know for those of you that work with me, you know, I call it a walk around. The only document that will go in there is one sample, page 28, but again, it needs to be dated for this school year. And you see the requirements right there. 90% of the staff lists at least 67% of the expectations. Not sure where they got that 67%. 70% of the students list at least 67% of the expectation. 90% of the staff give or utilize the acknowledgement system, and 50% of the students receive the acknowledgements. So there's your guidance. And you see in the rubric, a 0 is you don't have the 2 criteria. A 1 is 2 criteria are met. A 2 is all 3 of the criteria are met. Okay, all righty, row 3.
All right, so we've talked about this a little bit. Marla alluded to the fact that a lot of our teams in the past were already found great value in completing the SAS every year. Not everybody did that. But I know in the past on the TFI, the only requirement was an annual evaluation of your program, which included the SAS as one of your assessment tools, as well as the TFI. So most teams easily could satisfy that requirement on the TFI. This year, though, the SAS is actually a requirement. And is everybody has to complete. And I guess I'm going to point out, and it, to me, it should go without saying that most people should realize that the SAS is necessary, considering that page 5 of the application is entirely about the SAS, which, as you can see in row 3 here, it immediately actually refers to it. If you're good, for scoring yourself as a 2, the SAS subscale scores are included, either summary provided by PBIS apps or the SAS summary form, which again is page 5. I will point out, and it's been here on several of these rows or in several of these requirements, that if you're an early childhood program, there's a companion guide that would
fulfill that requirement.
yes.
And Matthew, I
Good.
have permission from one of our participants to actually show their SAS. So if you wouldn't mind,
Oh.
I'm sharing and I'll share.
I had one. I also have one in there, but
Okay,
no, you can share that one. If you do want to include your scores, because we have several schools that have been saying, but where can I put it? And a lot of the times I've been saying, if it's not asked for, please don't include it. Please don't add extra items. We love everything you're doing, but please don't add extra items. We realize this is listed as a requirement. And I've had some schools say, where can I put my lovely report? So the network said you can put it in the application folder, would be where you can put the SAS score if you really want to show this report. It's not necessary because you're going to enter all of these scores on your application itself. But if you really want to include that, put it in the application folder. Go ahead, Marla. I'm so sorry.
no
Can I
worries.
ask one question though?
Yes,
Certainly.
Regarding this, so the way that this reads, in order to score yourself a 2, it says the SAS subscale scores are included, and it says either summary provided by the PBIS apps or by the SAS summary form. Is that one or the other, or is that both, or does that make sense?
Yes.
Can I include the PDF that I download from PBIS apps that I get when my team or when my staff completes the survey? Can I include that? And does that satisfy?
The application part?
Yes.
No, you'll have to fill out the
You
application.
still, so you still have to fill out page 5,
Mhm.
because the way that reads, it says, or the SAS summary.
And I have a feeling that was an error of linking because the paper pencil version, which is permitted, has a summary form, and that's you would enter into the summary within the
Okay.
application. So I have a feeling that was an error of here's what your summary form would look like. But we want you to add your scores directly in the application, just to make sure nothing gets missed.
Okay.
Because
Great
again,
question.
if the application isn't complete, they might actually not accept your information. So first, thank you so much, Angel, for letting me pull up yours. Yours was the first one I thought of. They had a wonderful return of their SAS, and my friends at Cheney have been working and implementing for a number of years now, so you can see multiple years for them. You can also see the beautiful way that this report is laid out for you. And the important piece is, of course, to use the date that's within this school year. But as I mentioned, you're going to enter in the one side, which is the school-wide current status, and you'll use these 3 scores down below where it says in place, partial or not. And then the very next piece is then, what is the improvement priority? And again, instead of in place, partial and not, we're looking at high, medium, and low. And you can see that it's broken up beautifully into the 4 areas: school-wide, non-classroom, classroom current, as well as individual current status. So I just wanted you to have a visual because I know I'm a visual girl. I wanted you to see it just in case you haven't seen the beautiful report that can be run. Thanks, Matthew, for letting me hijack the screen. Now it's back to you.
Oh,
And for that specific feature, it's just purely that you did it and you included those results. We're not qualifying them as high or low or you minimum requirement. It's really, did you do it? Because there is so much value in it. Now, we are also going to encourage the teams to use that information for decision-making, use that for action planning. And we might see that in your action plans. But for this year, it's purely, did you facilitate the SAS and include the scores for us to view? Now, the next row says school profile template. We did already talk about that. So for the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving. That specific one is, you didn't complete that page, which, forgive me, because I thought it said what page it was. And
Page 3.
thank you so much. No, it's actually page 4.
Was it 4?
It is.
Oh, wait.
And
It is.
yeah, it's different than the building demographic page, which is a requirement, but it's not in the rubric. So this one is that you kind of did it. So again, they value you taking the time to look at it. And then the other one is that 2 points means you completed it. You actually entered all of the information. They're not qualifying an increase or decrease there because we know this isn't the end of the year finished data. But that's it for that row, is that you completed that page of the application. There's no additional folder for that specific row. But Marla, could you speak a little bit about the student progress measure, which is the next row here?
And I know that you mentioned it earlier. It is a brand new feature this year, but it also then tells us the importance of PBIS. PBIS is really about decreasing our suspensions, both in school and out of school, while increasing our outcomes for our scholars, both academically and socially, emotionally. So this one, though we will not know this information, you will not add anything in there. So if you have your application handy, your paper version, make sure you star it, make sure you realize this is nothing that you can provide. It will be automatically pulled August-ish. I always put ishes on there. And they're going to compare it from last year to this year's. And I also want you to know that they give us some percentages to look at. But we also were so happy to hear that this was not an all or none. So if you didn't happen to decrease, it doesn't mean it throws out your application altogether, because we also know that when you first begin PBIS, sometimes your numbers do increase because you become more vigilant. You become more observant about what's happening. But in the rubric, it says a 0 is no change or an increase. And if you remember at the very top, we have to get 18 to have our 80%. If you happen not to get these 2 points, this is not the end of the world here. It's still a great possibility for you to achieve your points. If you happen to have a decrease and it's only, and if you look at that, they were really reasonable with us this year. It's 0.25%. You will get a 1. If you happen to have a decrease of 0.5%, then you will get a full 2. Again, please remember, you will not put this information in. And Brian, I see that you gave us a great thing to ponder. You talk about the fact that you're an alternative school and you don't do any out of school suspensions. So that's one of the things that we will hope that you mention on your school profile template, that you talk about that you're an alternative school and that you talk about the fact that you do not suspend. So that's something that, again, know that it's not a make or break. It will be taken into consideration and it will be considered.
Yeah, and that's something we're still reaching out to the network about, if it is 0 for both years, because there are 3 different elements here that they are assessing. So we're still learning as well, but that's a really good point, because you can't decrease from 0 to 0, but that's still a success.
And if you are a 0, that is something to celebrate, and hopefully they see that, and I'm sure they will. Okay, now we're going to talk about that current action plan, which is what Susan wanted to know about.
Yes, so again, current action plans shouldn't be new to any of us. They've, in previous years, it's always been a requirement. This year, the exception is they're looking for specifically, in order for you to score 2, to have 3 action steps in the plan. In the past years, all they did was, and I'm going to use air quotes, all they did was ask teams for an action plan, which I'll be honest, a lot of people took a lot of liberties in what action plans look like. Susan referenced, or Marla and Susan both referenced action plans. There's an action plan included in the no, it's in the TFI. It's in the TFI. It's included in the TFI. We encourage people to use that. By all means, that doesn't mean that you have to use that one. That we just, again, it's a template. It's something to use. It's better than nothing. The
Minimal action plan.
well, and that's I guess that's what I want to preface the most is in the past, we got a lot of action plans that were minimal. This year, again, it's built now into this rubric. They are asking for 3 action steps. And the way they score that is you get a 0 if you have no action steps, obviously. You get a 1 if you have fewer than 3 action steps. And then you can possibly get a 3 if you have all 3 action steps in your plan. Again, what document, what template, what that looks like is entirely up to your team. We would encourage you to use the action plan in the TFI. I think we have one on our website, or we have 2 on our website. We have the one that's in the TFI as well as a scaling up action plan. I believe that's correct. Am I right? Those are both on our website.
You also included one in our constellation.
There is one. It's not a constellation one, but I had the permission of one of our schools to share what they utilize. What they did is they actually took their scores from the rubric from last year and then build it out.
I'm
And
not
I know
sharing.
Matthew
I
is
can.
getting ready. He is doing an awesome job at trying to juggle multiple screens here.
Threw a lot at him today. And I will also say, I appreciate this because it's directly tied to those tier 1 features, which is really important that these actions are connected to your TFI, connected to the features of a high quality PBIS system.
And so, for example, that's what exactly what they did. You see their score from what they had last year. From that score, they determined they needed to do something. That's what was put in their action. The person responsible and when it was done, they chose to actually highlight the rows that were done. You can see some rows that are partially highlighted because they're not done. But this was how they felt it kept them organized and it helped them stay focused on the activities or the actions, because that goes all the way back to our quote at the beginning, the actions that will move them forward.
Marla, I really like this example because I think it really exemplifies how the action plan doesn't need to be a really huge formal, we're in the business of education. And when we hear plans, we think of SMART goals and strategies and action steps. And we think of all those things that go with these big school improvement plans. And they're real formal processes. And I really like this because it's really just as simple as what you see here. It's the team met. They went over, they went over their TFI. They decided that here's 3 areas that we want to improve in. Here's what we're going to do to do that somewhat. I mean, who's responsible and the timeline, here's the timeline that we're going to hold ourselves, sort of accountable to. I just like the fact that don't think of it as this big formal, like, again, as a whole nother plan, I guess.
They also
We do
use it
that.
as a docking place to put some things on it. Now they know that those links are not going to be something that's accepted.
That's a great point.
But this goes back to the fact that this should be for you.
Yeah, well,
This is for you, not the reviewers. This is something you use, you keep it alive, and you keep it in the forefront of your thoughts.
and we met, we evaluated ourselves. Here's what we need to do. This is who's going to sort of do it or check in on us or whatever. And then here's the time frame that we want to, accomplish it in.
And this is just an example. It's not an exemplar. It's just an example.
Now, the next row is getting into our team roster and meeting minutes. So this is another one of those rows that have multiple criteria. So first, we need 6 examples of monthly meeting minutes. And then we also need a team roster. And then on top of that, this is where it gets weird. We need evidence of data analysis and decision-making. Now, that evidence should take place inside your meeting minutes. So they will be reading each of these meeting minutes and looking for conversations around data. So they don't necessarily need to see your charts and your graphs. So it's okay if you use links for your team to then reference the data that they're looking at. That's okay. I do encourage you to make sure we know what data you're looking at. But we don't need the charts and the graphs. We just need to know what data were you looking at and what decisions were being made. It'd be great to see then maybe follow-ups from meeting to meeting. But really, in order to score that too, they need to see 6 meeting minutes. And in those minutes are the evidence of the decision-making. So not just, oh yeah, behaviors really went up this month, but truly we notice an increase in behaviors at this specific grade level location, whatever, and here's what we're doing about it. And then they also need to see that roster. So Matthew, if you could hop back into Constellations folder, I'm so sorry.
And thank you so much, Matthew. You really are doing an awesome job.
Again, I have an example, not an exemplar by any means here. So it's in our team roster and meeting minutes folder. And there are not 6 because I didn't feel like making 6 fake ones. I'm so sorry. That very first document there is an example of your team roster. We know some schools have it listed in every single minutes. And so if it is explicitly listed in your minutes, then you don't have to have a separate one. But we want to really make sure that you have those roles that are defined in the TFI. Make sure we have our systems coordinator, make sure we have our administrator identified, that we have the knowledge across grade levels, behavioral expertise, our family member, for some of our older teams, older grade levels, sorry, that we even have that student representation. So here again, it's not an exemplar. And look, Susan's our administrator in Constellation Intermediate, and she didn't even know it. But here we have, again, on the left-hand side, we don't just have that person, but that I teach 7th grade is helpful for the reviewer to see that we have a wealth of grade levels represented, a wealth of positions represented, and then what is their function within the team? And then I know a lot of schools also include what is their function within the meeting? Who's facilitating? Who's the timekeeper? Who's observing our process? So that's also helpful. So we do have this separately, but then we have a little bit of this embedded into those meeting minutes, but again, this is not an exemplar. It's just a possible way of doing it. Matthew, can you hop us back into the folder to kind of look at my meeting minute sample? Oh, and one thing I want to point out, I intentionally left this as a Google Doc to show really quickly. Can we do, I'm so sorry.
Oh, how to turn it into a PDF.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hold on. Can you stay on the screen? I'm so
No.
sorry.
Yes.
Maybe.
Matthew may kill us by the end of this
Oh.
session.
Matthew, can you show us how to click on file? In the top left-hand corner, and we're going to download as a PDF. So once we know, okay, yes, this is our official roster, this is the good one. What we need to do is download this Google Doc as a PDF because the requirement is that it's either a PDF or a Word document. They are not accepting Google Docs. So make sure that if it is a Google Doc in your folder, that you go ahead and download it as a PDF. I personally prefer PDF over Word just because your formatting is so goofy and you don't want to lose something in that. So what we would do then is download as PDF and it goes into your download folder, your desktop, wherever you want it to save to. And then I would file upload into the folder, the actual document that way. So this is a Google Doc. Make sure that we do change that into Word or PDF.
And I know as we review this evidence that's in the folders, we're trying to catch that and trying to let the schools know that they may still have some Google Docs out there. So that's one of the things that we want to offer you, that as you're loading things or when you think you're done, if it's send us a little message, let us know, and we'll check your information.
So if we can go ahead and browse that meeting minutes now. Again, not an exemplar, but you can see the meeting date. Was it within this school year? You can see who was at the meeting. This team had a previous parking lot that they were reviewing some ideas and then they were napping apparently. Then what was the data that they were looking at? So they looked at some walkthrough data. They had this is like I predicted this. They noticed an increase in staff and student awareness of those expectations. So the next step is to celebrate that success. And we literally talked about that earlier today. They looked at some of that acknowledgement data. All but 3 students received their ticket quota. So that must be defined in their acknowledgement system. They looked at some of the behavior data. So last month they were focused on restroom expectations. And now we've seen a decrease in the unwanted behavior and an increase in the preferred behaviors. Now this month we noticed that we're getting ready for spring break and it's falling apart, right? So rough housing in the cafeteria. So here's their plan that they put into place to address that problem that they identified by looking at the data and what they plan to do about it, how they plan to communicate that with the staff. They also noticed that there were a couple of students that maybe need some advancing supports or increased support. So there's some students that the tier 1 team said, oh, these 2 students qualified based on our decision rules for maybe needing tier 2 support. So we need to make sure that we move that information along to the tier 2 team to make sure that they didn't miss it as well, just as that checks and balances. Again, they focus back on that action plan. So again, this is just an example of some of the conversations that you could be seeing in your meeting minutes that clearly shows data was being looked at, decisions were being made.
So what data was looked at? What might your conversation have been? What will your action step be? And then the next meeting, we look at what we said our action step would be. Were we successful? How do we know? Do we need to tweak it? How do we know?
Right.
Any questions on?
That's what I was waiting. Again, the format for your agenda can be as unique as your school building. They really just want to read those conversations.
Okay, so just following down the rows from that section, we're going straight into the matrix and posters by location and making sure you're including that classroom piece. They're really interested about that classroom piece. And you see that it's actually recognizing that it's from the tier fidelity 1.3 and 1.8. So when you think about this, what they want to see is your complete matrix that has all of your locations. You know, that's that big grid that you probably only have it in your handbook, maybe located in a central place in your school. It's not everywhere because it really is too large. And plus, more times than not, we can't read it because it's so small. The next piece that they need to see, though, is on that matrix, you have all of these different locations. They now want to see your location posters. And it is best that if it's the location posters, which are actual pictures of those location posters in the location. That is a tongue twister too.
Mhm.
So you see in rating it, a 0 would be no evidence of a matrix or posters. That's obvious. A 1 is we either have the matrix or we have our location classroom posters. A 2 is you have both of them. Now, in our constellation folder, we have a sample from one of our districts. And again, it's a sample or an example because you will see that what was uploaded, though it is beautiful, it's their actual posters that they use, but it's not by location. But first, you can see, and they are already done in PDFs, you can see first the matrix. If you want to click on that, Matthew, this is their matrix for all of their location. They even have the parking lot because they happen to be a high school. And you can see each one of those. You can see their expectations down the side. It's very clear and it's very clean. So if you pop out of that one, Matthew, what they shared with us is the actual posters or the PDFs that they created their posters from. They've included all of them, though. You can see the hallway, you can see the cafeteria, you can see the auditorium, all the way through. But what would have made this better would be the posters in JPEG in their locations. But again, this is just a sample. We're working and we'll get that upgraded or enhanced, we shall say, to show that they're actually in location, because I oftentimes say you cannot have implementation by lamination. You actually have to see that they're in place. So hopefully that was clearer, that when you looked at this, you actually now could see what it could look like.
I have a quick question. Do those
Rachel?
downloads for the evidence pictures in the classrooms have to be JPEG, or is it okay if we transferred them to PDF?
Yes.
Either one is fine. Yes, this is that one time where I know I said Word or PDF. JPEG is permitted for this folder. But PDF is also accepted because that's an easier scroll as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great question.
We've actually had some schools that just created one big PDF with all of their pictures. So that way the reviewers just scroll through one document. So what about the teaching aspect? What do we need to know about that, Matt?
So moving on to the teaching aspect and what's required for lesson plans, there, I first want to point out the first bullet there says year-long teaching schedule. And then the second thing I really want to point out too is the fact that they're not just looking for a written description of the, they're not just looking for a written description, but they also want the teaching materials that were used. Because if you look at how you get scored to receive a 2, and I know everyone out there is looking to get a 2. So that's often why we skip right over some of the other scores. But to get that 2, they want both teaching schedule. So they want to see that when you know, like what time of the year that you plan to do your initial teaching, as well as those refreshers or those mini lessons that we all know that need to be done after, well, whenever your team or your school decides are necessary, but oftentimes we see that after long breaks. But let's be honest, we all need a little bit of a refresher. I know I do. At any given time during the year, sometimes that's helpful just to revisit things, right? So most importantly, though, schedule and material methods included. So not one or the other. Oftentimes in the past, we'd get, you know, well, we taught this expectation the first week of September, we taught this expectation the second week, we taught, that's oftentimes what we see on our side as far as evidence goes. But they are looking for more than just a schedule. They're also looking for how was it taught, right? What did you use to teach it? What methods did you incorporate into that lesson to teach it? So not entirely that much different, just a little bit more specific with the information that you're including. And does anyone have any questions regarding teaching, I guess?
Matthew, do you have an example of the year-long teaching schedule?
Do we have that in the folder? In Constellations folder? Yes, we do,
I can,
but it's empty.
I have,
So that's not helpful.
I do have samples. Hold on for 1 second.
Yeah,
Give me 1 second to get,
And while Marla's looking for that, sometimes that's located like on your beginning of the year staff review, where you explicitly told your teachers, here's when you're teaching each of these lessons. And then sometimes it's staff meetings when that review is taking place. Like I said, it could be within a slideshow, it could be within a staff agenda, or we know some teams have it directly in their PBIS handbook. Because we always review hallway at this week, this day or week, restrooms at whatever. But those might be the places that you find it, because I know you have it. Because I know that your staff was following a very specific method for teaching your expectations, as well as some of your other characteristics. And I forget what it's called, but you have a schedule
Right.
for that.
Just would we be doing like how we do our the SEL program does it, he taught it also. And then like in their morning meetings, they did like the teachers did the review of what the lesson was for that week.
Yes, because you explicitly assigned the staff, here's when you're reinforcing what was taught in the SEL classroom. Here was the schedule that the SEL classroom was using to formally teach those lessons. And then here's how the teachers were following up with that.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
so here is one example from one of our schools, and this was for their August, September. The one thing that this one doesn't do, it doesn't give you the times that they did their booster sessions. Because that's the other piece that they want to see, because we know that PBIS or teaching expectations is not a one-time event. It has to be something that we do all the time, but this would be their introductory. So in August and September, this was the way that they chose to roll it out. And in this particular one, the calendar is actually the lesson plan is actually connected straight to the calendar. They also have them downloaded as PDFs as well. So this is one example. And then the recommendations moving forward is to also add in when were the booster sessions completed. For some of our other schools, they might have other programs that they do, like the mentioning of the social emotional learning lessons. We have character lessons that are being done in some of our buildings. There would be that other separate explanation of when those take place and the materials that you would use. This is probably one of the folders, Jessica, and you can elaborate on this. This folder has the most flexibility in it because there is no one way to do this. There's so many different good ways to do this.
You just want to make sure it's clear to the scorers that we have a schedule, a clear schedule, and it's not just, yes, don't forget to teach all these expectations, but that we were very intentional about the order that we were having staff do it, and that we ensured that they were teaching all of our expectations, all of our locations, that all of that is explicit to our staff, but also that you are including those materials. Remember, those have to be in a Word or a PDF format. So if it was a video, then explain to us how you used that video to teach those expectations. Now, on that next row down, we're going to talk about feedback and acknowledgements, and I'm going to read exactly what it's asking for. And this comes from the TFI language. So this isn't a made up definition of it. They want the clear written set of procedures for specific behavioral feedback that is linked to your school-wide expectations. So a lot of schools will use tickets or points or tokens or other recognition things. I'm sorry, words are hard. I'm sorry. And those are wonderful. We don't want the pictures of those. What we want is the clear written set of procedures for delivering that feedback. That's what they want. Yes. So I'm seeing some people adding a lot of extra information into this folder, and it's going to clutter up that folder, and the scores are going to have a hard time going through all of that to truly find what is your clear written set of procedures. How did you tell your staff to use those tickets? How did you tell your staff or train your staff on how to deliver those points. When do you deliver those points? How frequently should we be delivering those points? So we do have a couple of examples in our Constellation folder that I can show you. Again, these are not exemplars. These are some examples of that clear definition. So this might be found in your PBIS handbook. This might be found in a slideshow that was shared out with the staff. Hopefully this always go back to when they're like, when am I, how many tickets am I supposed to be giving out a week? Or how many points should my students be receiving each month? That it's clearly defined. That's when it truly is a system. So this was a system acknowledgement system matrix that we actually shared at our last coaches network. And this defines those high frequency. So that was the stars. That's how we became Constellation Intermediates. What was the redemption of those high frequency? What was our unpredictable or the intermittent acknowledgement that we were having our staff deliver? Who's delivering them? Who are they giving them to? How often are they giving them? What are we doing with this information? So here you can see all of the different ways that we deliver that acknowledgement or that feedback and how it's directly linked to our school-wide expectations. So that was that star that was mentioned in one of the other mock documents, but safety, teamwork, attitude, and respect, how those are being acknowledged or how students receive feedback for those expectations. And this is meant to directly link. Again, this is not an exemplar. This was just an example that we made up to kind of show you what your system could look like. Matthew, if you can show us the other one. So sorry. This is another, my whole folder.
I don't know what happened. Yeah.
This is another one. Now notice that the title for this is page 4, because this is a longer resource. So if it's within a handbook, that's fine. I either recommend that you save or print a PDF, just the page that explains your acknowledgement system. Don't just throw your entire handbook in there. Or for example, this one says page 4. So Matthew, if you can scroll down to page 4, you can see all the other information that was included in here. But this is where the acknowledgement system is defined for their staff. And what this is showing is that the staff always has access to this information, and that's nice to know. But here you can see that they were given verbal feedback with ticket delivery. They also had Granny's Wacky Prize. They have Toodles. They have Fun Friday, how students earn this, additional acknowledgements that we give. Now, something that I would probably point out for, as Marla was saying, that next step is how is this explicitly linked to your school-wide expectations? I think it's assumed that it is, but it's not explicitly clear. And you want to make sure that your staff know that we're pointing out those behaviors that we have been talking about teaching and reinforcing. So that would probably be the next step for this specific document. But these are just some examples of ways that we have laid out this information to our staff.
You know what, Matthew, why don't you pause right there for a second?
yeah.
It's actually quite beautiful. Because the next line is really talking about our flow charts. And I'm, again, coming clearly out of the TFI, which is 1.5, is about behavior definitions. And they're also linking policy 1.6 here, because this is also how the system is ran. This is how we know everybody understands the things that we are looking for. Now, for this particular line, we're looking for not only the flow chart, but also the definitions. So you can see that this particular school has theirs labeled as minor and major. It could possibly be classroom or office, whichever is fine. It talks about what their minor offenses are, what are their major offenses. It talks about, as you can see, what should we do? So they give you step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, because remember, PBIS is grounded in teaching the behaviors that we want to see, providing feedback to our scholars, as well as then reteaching if we need to reteach. So it's all wrapped up into this beautiful package. So one of the things that maybe, and it might be down below because this isn't a document that I was ready to show today, but it was perfect, is the other piece is we need to know what the definitions are. So that the reason for that, again, oh, look, they're right there. The reason why we need the definitions are, of course, because of that consistent language? Are we defining all of those behaviors the same way? How do we define cheating? How do we define disrespect? How do we define disruption? That's the importance of the definitions. And the importance of this is then also, remember, the TFI tells us we have to train our staff, and our staff is everyone. So how are we doing that piece? So that is a quick example and hopefully a better understanding of this application process, which brings us to the fact that we're 3 minutes over. And please, we're going to ask for forgiveness. But we also want to know, do you have any questions about tier 1 that we did not cover? We know we didn't get the tier 2 that wasn't in our plan. We know we're doing tier 2 at our next date.
Because we know that you will not be eligible for tier 2 for that silver recognition if you don't demonstrate your bronze recognition level first. So we really wanted to make sure everybody understood what's required for the bronze level recognition, because even if you are applying for silver or gold, you have to have the solid evidence for bronze in addition to the additional tiers.
And that is 70.
Once we download the information into our folder, does anything else need to be done, or is that simply the submission?
That is the submission, but if you want us to check it out, let us know when you're done. We'll check it out for you, give you some feedback. And because again, our goal truly is your success. If this is what you want, we need to help you get there by reviewing and providing you feedback.
So on May 1st, when the folders just close, and then the evaluators know then to look in those folders. Like, we don't need to send an email, all done, ready to go, nothing, okay.
It's like magic.
And that's a great question, because I had the same question. And again, we would love to know when you're done so that we can
Yeah,
kind of
right.
pace ourselves as well. But there is no additional requirement, and it seems kind of vulnerable, but
Okay.
that's a
All
great
right,
question.
Thank you, thank you.
I also, because I know that some of you already have to go, and I do apologize that we tried our best to have a timed agenda and it flopped.
Not completely. It didn't flop completely.
True. But I did throw the evaluation link in there. If you can please complete that, we greatly appreciate that. We absolutely spend the time to review those. So while we are wrapping up, we do have just a few little updates that we're going to throw at you. But we wanted to make sure that we gave the evaluation link out because we are over time. But we would also like to mention that Ohio has a new PBIS website, and I can't remember if we shared this at the Coaches Network or not, but we'll share it now. It is ohiopbis.org, and it is a platform where you can receive the required training in addition to other great training modules. These are the same modules that are available on the LMS. But the difference for this one is anybody can register for an account on the Ohio PBIS websites, whereas the LMS is only for people with an Ohio ID. So sometimes we lose some of those bus drivers or custodians or
Coaches.
or our athletic coaches who are required to have that PBIS training that's defined in the rules that require schools to have PBIS frameworks. So this is a great resource that is free and provides that required training qualifications. I'm losing my words. I'm so
That's
sorry.
okay. That it aligns beautifully with the rule that tells us that every 3 years we must retrain our staff. But then we have to take into consideration, we get new staff annually, sometimes even mid-annually, if that's a word. So this is a beautiful opportunity to make sure that we have properly trained our staff on the foundations of PBIS. The role of the team, the building team, is to actually personalize it to your environment, but this will give you the foundations. Thank you, Cindy. Happy Easter to you as well. So as you think about this, we know, again, we appreciate all of the effort, the time, the dedication that you are putting forward with PBIS. But think about how and what you'll do with this information today. Because again, going back to our very first quote about our actions, making sure that our actions match our words and our actions move us forward. So while you're thinking about your optimistic closure and completing the evaluation, hopefully we are able to share with you that we want you to have a wonderful, relaxing, rejuvenating, refreshing, and if I could possibly think of another R word, spring recess. But thank you so much. We know this work is hard, but we also know this work is worth it. So hopefully your bunny is changed.
Okay, so this is our checkout. We realized that we ran out of time. I'm so sorry. But think about where are you now with your recognition process, at least for bronze? We know we didn't get through silver and gold yet. We are going to start with that on April 20th at our next flipped office hours. But when it comes to the application in general and within tier 1, maybe where would your bunny be at this point after hearing some of that information?
Bunny bee.
I think I'm still a 1. I still have the side eye. I'll be better. I'll be like the little smiling bunny after submission date. How about that? We'll go with that.
Angel, it's so funny. I never thought of number 1 as a side eye. I always thought that bunny was like, what?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was definitely a side eye bunny.
No,
I'm
I
sorry.
appreciate your interpretation.
I thought it was like the say what? You want me,
Yeah,
you want me, you're
that's-
asking me to do what?
That's it. That was it, Matt. Exactly. So thank you.
I feel that way often.
Yeah, and something we didn't get to say enough during the time was if there's other evidence that you have, that's great. And it's essential for your TFI scoring. It's essential for your annual evaluation that your team is going to do for action planning for next year. But if it's not requested in the application, please don't include it into a folder.
Don't stop doing it.
It's great information. Please celebrate it. Please use it as an opportunity to share with your staff. Look at everything we've accomplished this year. And we, not just the team, we, the staff, share it with your community, share it with your families. That's amazing, the progress that you're making. Just please don't add it to the folders.
We're gonna
Jessica,
ask
thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I was looking through my TFI notes from our meeting. And there are a lot of sections where we discussed what would we use as evidence, but they're not requested in the rubric. So that means even though we talked about it and we know we're doing it, you only want the things that are in the rubric. So like, for example, like 1.7 was professional development. There's nothing on the rubric about that. So I'm not putting anything in, minus our teaching schedule was included during professional development. Right?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
and that's, again, those are great talking points for, okay, did we do that? Yeah, we totally trained them. When? Oh,
Right.
and if you don't know, then that's a good discussion point, and that's the purpose of having your own personal evidence for that, is so that the team can say, no, we trained them on this day.